A Mochi moment from Mark, who writes, I just want to thank you for making GLP-1s affordable. What would have been over $1,000 a month is just $99 a month with Mochi. Money shouldn't be a barrier to healthy weight. 3 months in, and I have smaller jeans and a bigger wallet. You're the best. Thanks, Mark. I'm Myra Ahmed, founder of Mochi Health. To find your Mochi moment, visit joinmochi.com.
Mark is a Mochi member compensated for his story.
911, what's the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Tactical Living Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Walton, joined by Sergeant Walton. Clint, how are you?
I'm good.
So here's the interesting thing. People who don't live in Southern California might not know how difficult it is to be a police officer in California. And when it comes to the political realm, typically police officers are all in union with any political figureheads that are so anti-defund the police.
There's so many dynamics with this, like really looking at the politics within California and correlating the who we support and who we don't even know that we're supporting based on our figureheads it's such a strange dynamic.
So we have something called PORAC in California. They represent over 80,000 police officers, and it's the Police Officers Research Association of California. And last week, I was on Instagram messaging back and forth with somebody, and I go back to the main screen and I see that PORAC had endorsed Chad Bianco, as they should. Chad Bianco is he works for the Sheriff's Department here in the city of Riverside. Why are you looking at me like that?
I'm just looking at you.
and then about an hour later, because I had engaged with that by hearting it, the very first thing that I see an hour later when I log back into Instagram is that PORAC endorsed Villaraigosa, and he is the Democratic candidate for governor here in California. Now, I want to talk about how police officers often make the mistake of thinking that they can be everything to everyone. And this is one of the most foolish moves that I have seen in a very long time as it pertains to such a wide entity that's related to law enforcement. And I have no problem speaking very vocally about this because what they try to do is appease everybody. And so in my head, I'm like, man, I need to go back when I'm done working so that I can check out what other people are saying about this, because I mean, this is a huge organization. And I went back on later on, and lo and behold, they turned off their comments, which just makes them look even more foolish. And I'm explaining this because I think that it's important to call out anybody who makes this kind of mistake, and make no mistake that this is a mistake. And I think that what happens is that a lot of times in law enforcement, you are trained and conditioned to be the one who shows up, and you have the answers and the solutions for everybody. And you're trying to appease everybody, even if that means the good side and the bad side.
Yeah, and I know with supporting both sides of those candidacies, it starts, like, in my opinion, it really demeans that endorsement or that support for those given candidates, like especially for a big figurehead within our state. If you're going and playing both sides just in hopes that, well, if this person wins, then they'll support us. Well, if this person wins, then they'll support us, or their actions won't hurt us as much as they could.
Yeah, but the truth is that the vast majority, and I can say this from talking to hundreds of officers that I do on a regular basis, they don't feel that way. And so they really drop the ball in this regard because they are not going with the census, right? And so a lot of people, our mayor race that's upcoming in California, it's massive for us because we all know that the majority of the state is red, not like by a massive margin, but I would say probably at least 60%. And you see this in real life. And I'm not saying like the fake headlines and things like that. Most people in California, unless you live in like the OC, then they agree that we work hard, we play hard, and we like things to be safe, and we want lower taxes, and we don't want to have the burden of our homes burning down and no reservoirs filled with water. And we want to know where our tax money is going. So this election is very, very important. I would argue one of the most important that we have had in our lifetime. And so when you get caught up in the mentality as a police officer to be everything to everyone, let's say that you often feel the need to be the protector, the counselor, the disciplinarian, the community voice, and you do that all at once, what this does is it's going to lead to things like overextension, blurred roles, burnout, and this could happen at an individual officer level, but as we're seeing here, at an organizational level too.
Yeah, I had an assembly member tell me one time, it's especially with organizations like PORAC and how it deals with its members is they treat us like mushrooms, to where they keep us in the dark and just feed us shit all the time. And when he gave me that analogy with it, I was like, you're absolutely right. Most law enforcement officers don't really know like who's being supported, who's dealing, or what information is being pushed out there, because one, whether you're involved in politics or not, you're trusting that these entities are going to be there and support you. And that goes from the governmental levels to the local levels, including your administration.
Yeah. And as it relates to this situation with PORAC, obviously they endorsed both sides as a means to be able to keep the peace, but it actually created the opposite effect. And I think that when you try to straddle the fence like this, what happens is it seems disingenuous to the public and most importantly to the members.
Yeah, you're losing that validation of this is who supports law enforcement. This is whether, and I don't know enough about Virgos's campaign to say whether he supports law enforcement, but I know historically when he was the mayor of the city of LA, he had a lot of cuts towards LAPD and towards their police agencies, to where he created like that dynamic, not as bad as it is now, but he started that progression of the dynamic to defunding the police and to create that negative influence against their law enforcement.
Yeah, and this topic is one that's not taught at the academy, and it's actually dependent upon the leadership within your particular department to make sure that they're guiding you to do things correctly. And when an officer tries to be a friend, a disciplinarian, a problem solver, they do that all in one single call. The public is often going to perceive that as inconsistency or even a lack of authenticity. And this is going to cause a lot of resentment, exhaustion, and even this sense of, I think, identity conflict for that officer.
Yeah, not being able to stand your ground and be able to stand up for what you believe in and who you are as an individual when you're being represented by a higher power, it's something that it leads to that conflict in your own mind to where you can't determine, hey, well, where do I even stand?
And I think too, so I'm going to go back to this PORAC example because I think it's a very valid one. What happens too is that the people who are in the sphere of influence for that organization, be it something like PORAC or even an individual police department, the others are going to lose credibility simply based on association.
Yeah, you lose that credibility because you can't be decisive on who you're supporting, who you want to endorse. If you're playing defense on both sides, your credibility just goes out the window.
Yeah, and I've had no problem talking with people about this because it's something that is important to call out. And there are some remedies, some ways to be able to serve without over-serving. And I think the most important thing is to get real clear on your role. So know what you're there to do and what you're not there to do. And then you need to take a stance. There's a certain point where morals and values come into play. We'll use the example of COVID. Clint and I had a very in-depth conversation when all of the uncertainty was happening with COVID as to what happens if my department says that I have to get the vaccine? And it was a hard no. I have morals, I have standards, I have values, I love my life, I love my body. This is a hard no. So if then, right, we had that conversation and we strategized. And so luckily it didn't come to fruition. We didn't have to worry about that. But a lot of the times people get caught up in the likability, I want them to like me, so let me endorse two candidates, versus having some kind of moral high ground to stand on.
Yeah, if you if you're not holding true to your own values and integrity and saying, well, I have to do this, and if it goes against anything and everything that you stand for, then you need to really have that conversation. You need to look internally and say, well, what is it that if I do this, what's going to change and negatively impact me?
And also knowing what your boundaries are, right? The mere fact that, I was kind of talking shit to somebody about this, somebody in PORAC, I'll just say that, and knowing what your boundaries are. So the fact that they turned off the comments and I couldn't even see the rhetoric after tells me that everybody in those comments, they knew what their boundaries were. And yet the PORAC that decided to make these 2 endorsements, they didn't know their boundaries. And this is a big stab at your authenticity, and everybody saw right through that.
And I think it's really good that people are aware and they're observing this, because to affect change, you have to come together and you have to say, this is not what I stand for. This is crossing my boundaries, and let's make a change.
Yeah, I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below, and as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.